Because we are sort of running tight to time. A few more stragglers coming in. All right, so my name's Erica. I'm a careers advisor in the Careers and Student Employment team. Now, don't mind me sitting down. It's not just because I'm elderly, but it's because I actually have to bend down to use the microphone because I'm quite tall, so I thought I may as well just sit down on the job and make myself more comfortable. I'm just not sure if it was mentioned up front before, but if you haven't already scanned in today, so to check yourself in, the QR code's up on the screen there. If you check in, you're in the draw to win a $50 U-Bar voucher, so definitely worthwhile. All right, so you've all chosen to sit in on the Tailoring Your Job Applications session, which is a good segue, I guess, from the panel event that we just had, so I'm glad you're all here. Just to give you a little bit of my background, just so you can, I guess, assume that I know a little bit about what I'm talking about, but I've worked at the university now as a career advisor for 2 years. I also, just up until recently, worked in the student employment team with Sina, who you heard from earlier, and Rebecca. So helping employers to find Macquarie students basically for paid opportunities. Prior to that, I've worked for about 25 years in human resources, talent acquisition, learning and development roles, and also more recently, before I joined the university, worked for an organisation in their early careers program, so looking after internships and helping out with the grad program and things like that. So that's just a little bit about my background, not to just show you how old I am, but just to show you that I've had a little bit of experience, I guess, in terms of, you know, being on the other side and reviewing a lot of job applications. Can I just get a show of hands of anybody who's either recently or at any time applied for a role where you knew, you know, based on what you could read in the job ad, you felt that you strongly that you could do the job and you had what it took to do the job, but you didn't get a call in for an interview? Yeah, it's most of us. And that's, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that after today you're going to get every interview, you know, get an interview for every job that you apply for. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be because, you know, there is quite simply a very strong applicant pool, so a lot of applicants who have applied who do meet the criteria. It could be that, you know, someone internally got the job, because that sometimes happens. They advertise internally and they advertise externally. But what we do hear from a lot of employers, and as myself as previously as being a recruiter and an employer, is that it's often, you know, you might know that you can do the job, but you haven't tailored your application. So you haven't actually spent the time to to show that employer that you have the skills that you know that you have, if that makes sense. So hopefully some of what we'll cover off today can help you do that. I've already done that part. Now, Rebecca stole my thunder earlier in the panel session, but and I'm going to slightly differ from her, but how long do you think it actually takes the average recruiter to review a resume? She said a minute or less. Actually, you know, there's different studies, but it can, you know, the 10 seconds sometimes is a reality. And it's not that they only take 10 seconds necessarily to read every single resume. They might take a little bit of time, but they can make a decision to keep reading, to actually spend more time reading your resume very quickly. And we'll take you through some of the ways that you can actually ensure that you stand out in that initial 10 to 20 to 30 seconds, so that you know, they do read your document clearly and they can see that you're a fit for their role. So why should you tailor? So what do we mean by tailor? It's basically adjusting your application for every role that you apply for. The first thing is that it demonstrates your enthusiasm for that specific job and for that specific company. A lot of people do tend to have their standard cover letter, standard resume, and they might not adjust it very much. And basically what you sort of tend to do then when you've got a standard one is you're sort of just telling them about all the skills, the great skills that you have, but you're not telling them about the skills that you have for their job. But more importantly, you're not telling them that you're passionate about their company. You're passionate about their job. And that's what everybody wants to hear. You're essentially telling everybody what they want to hear. It shows that your skills align to the role. So more often than not, and I had a consult earlier this week where the cover letter was good, They're talking about some great skills that they have, but when I looked at the job ad, they weren't the skills that they were asking for specifically in that job ad. So be mindful of just putting down all the great skills you have, because they're sort of, you know, great communication skills, great problem solving, whatever they may be. But if they're not asked for in the job ad, then you're not showing that employer that you have the exact skills they're asking for. And it helps with AI. So a lot of companies, especially with bulk recruitment, but a lot of companies just generally, their talent acquisition team do use AI or machine learning, basically applicant tracking systems, they call it, to scan your documents. So a machine actually sees your documents before an individual does, and it scans for things like keywords and, you know, things that they're looking for specifically for that particular role. So be mindful of that as well. So that's another reason to tailor your document. Insert words that are asked for in the job ad, skills, experience, those sorts of things. It prioritises the employer's needs, and what it means by that is it's not just you sort of telling them what skills you have, it's you making them feel that they need you for the job, and it's making them see that you understand what they need for that job. So you've taken the time to look at the job advert, you've maybe done a little bit of research, so you're actually telling them that you know what they need. Helps you to stand out, which is pretty self-explanatory, and what it does is help you to stand out for the people who aren't tailoring their documents, who aren't aligning all these things to the particular company or role, and shows that you're, you know, ideally the best fit. So how can you tailor? What do you need to do in order to tailor? If you do nothing else, read the job advertisement carefully. I know that sounds really simple and basic, and you would assume that everybody does that, but as someone who's recruited a lot, don't assume that and don't do that. Make sure you read the job advert. Read the instructions clearly. What are they asking for? Have they asked you to address the specific selection criteria? Have they said that your cover letter, for example, needs to be only, you know, keep it to 1 page or 2 pages? Follow the instructions very clearly. We've recruited, Sina and I and Rebecca as well, have recruited for roles on campus where it's bulk recruitment. They need a lot of students to fill some casual roles, and, you know, we've clearly said in bold letters, and you're normally not going to get the bold letters, by the way, but we try and be kind. You know, please answer these 2 questions in your application, and I would say, if lucky, 50% of people follow those instructions. If we're feeling nice and we don't have enough candidates, we may come back to those candidates and say, hey, you didn't answer the questions, we recommend you resubmit. But the reality is employers are not going to do that. So make sure you read those instructions really carefully in the job ad. And also make sure you look at what are the selection criteria, and you weave those throughout your cover letter as well as your resume as well. If you're able to get a position description, a lot of government roles, hospital roles, things like that will actually have it included in the ad. But if you've got a contact and you someone who you can reach out to in that talent acquisition team and you want to ask for a position description, it can give you a little bit more in-depth information about what's required for the role. It's not essential, but it can help if you can get your hands on that. Have a look at the company website. You know, 5 minutes, literally, to look on the website, look at their company values, look at their mission statement, what do they stand for, who are their customers, all that sort of thing. You know, it doesn't take a long time to read, and you don't need to be an expert. No one's expected to be an expert on every job that they apply for, or company they apply for. But showing a little bit that you've done a little research in your cover letter, for example, can go a long way. If you're going into a particular field, you know, stay up to date with industry news and things like that, because you can then use that, again, to help tell the story about why you're passionate about your industry, or what you know about your industry, or what you're excited to apply for this job because there's a particular technology coming out. I'm not very technical, so that's as far as I'll go with that analogy. But, you know, if you can show that sort of passion, interest, knowledge in your application, and then if you get an interview, then, you know, explain that a bit more at your interview, it's going to help you to stand out from other candidates. And LinkedIn's a great research tool. So following companies that you're interested in, or even if you're not following them, if you're going to apply for them, you see a job, you know, just have a look on their LinkedIn page. It can give you a little bit more rich and current and insight into the culture of an organisation, what's happening right now in that organisation, whereas the company website is obviously a little bit more static. So those sorts of things, that's the sort of research you can do. I know it sounds like a lot, you don't have to necessarily do it all, but use those things as tools, particularly if it's a job you're really passionate about and you're really keen on. But if you do nothing else, read the job ad. So what do you look for when you before you're preparing your application, you see a job, you're looking at, again, as I said, those selection criteria. So what is it, the ideal candidate will have, or what you will have, whatever it says in the ad, make sure you're addressing those in your documents and application. What are the key skills they're after? What are some of the key responsibilities? So don't just look in that selection criteria, but more often than not in an advert, they will talk about, key tasks of the job or the responsibilities of the job. So they can be clues as well, because you might have already done that sort of thing in some of your, in an internship or something similar. So you can draw on that in your application and use those examples in your application. I mentioned before, company values, mission statement, what's the company's purpose. Have a look at what, as I said, LinkedIn's a good way to look at what the company culture's like, what are they doing, what are the people there like, how do they dress, what do they say, what's happening on, if they're a big company, what's happening on campus or whatever it may be like that. But if you can get a sense for the company culture through those, having a look at those things, you can then instill that, put that into your written application, particularly cover letters where you can tell that story a little bit more. And what are their products and services? Do they interest you? Do they excite you? Are they maybe interested? Are they really big on sustainability? And are you passionate about that, for example? So I think it gives you something to find, one or two things, one or two reasons as to why you're really passionate about applying for that particular role in that company. So what do you tailor? The main thing that you can tailor your whole, you could rewrite it if you want, but I just want to sort of bust a myth, because you probably think, God, this is all sounding like a lot of work. As I said, 5 minutes on the company website, read the job ad. Really, most of you will have a standard cover letter and a standard resume, and that's fine. You don't have to completely rewrite your documents, but what you should do is tweak and tailor them. So your cover letter, and again, as someone who's recruited a lot, particularly recently, you can almost tell when a cover letter is a standard one, i.e. they've just got it and they've changed the company name, changed who they're addressing it to, because they're not talking about the skills that I've asked for in my job advert. And it sounds, you sort of think, oh, well, they can assume they can see my experience on the resume, but it sort of was touched on in the panel. Don't expect people to assume anything. You need to tell them, you need to draw that line and tell them exactly how you meet the criteria. Your professional summary or career objective, whatever you call it, that very first section on your resume, that's a really key one to change and adjust, because it's often the first thing that a recruiter or a hiring manager will read. And what you want it to do is actually, in that 10 seconds or 20 seconds that we talked about, that recruiters sort of scanning a document, it's like a teaser. You want to draw them in, and if they can see 3 or 4 things that actually relate to what they're asking for or needing in that job, it's going to think them, oh, I'm going to keep reading this person. And if you've got a 2-page document, they'll feel inclined to read it. So that section's a really easy one to tweak and tailor to match the job you're applying for. Key skills, so if you're seeing skills asked for in the job advert, weave those through your resume and your cover letter. You might change the actual key skill or your skills section that you have on your resume. A lot of people, again, just tend to have standard ones, excellent communication skills, teamwork, problem solving. And if they are asked for in the job ad, that's great. But if they're not, then, again, the recruiter can't see the linkage between you and their role. So try and just, it takes you a couple of seconds to change that up a little bit. If you're going for something, if you're in finance, put some technical finance skills that you have, financial statements, balance sheets, whatever it is, Excel. Make sure that it's not just those transferable skills only in your skills section. Link it to what they're asking for in the ad and what you're going to be required to do in the job. And similarly, in your responsibilities, or where you're listing what you did under each of your roles or your volunteer work, for example, you may shift those up a little bit and focus more on some that are more relevant to the job that you're applying for. Yesterday, I had a consult. I won't tell you who it is, but it was a person who's going for 2 different types of roles. So they actually have 2 different versions of their resumes, which was great. Sorry, no, they didn't. They had 2 different cover letters, but 1 version of the resume. And they'd done some HR-related things in one role, and they were going for an HR-related role, but that wasn't in their responsibilities. I couldn't see it anywhere in their responsibilities. They put it in their cover letter, but that's assuming the person read the cover letter in full. So you want to make sure you're just adjusting your documents accordingly. So how do you tailor? You know, it should only take 5 to 10 minutes or so of your time after you've read, you know, fully got the information ready together. So just adjust, you know, add and remove skills accordingly, as I talked about. Move sections around. So if you're going for a casual job that's not related to your degree, for example, you might put but you've worked, you know, casually in a cafe, you might put your work experience first before your education. But then when you're going for something related to your degree, you'll move your education section up front, because we call that first page of your resume prime real estate. So that's basically, again, if they're scanning the first page, you want the best stuff to be on there. So move sections around if you need to. Again, think like the person who's reading the resume. What do they want to see? Consider what's the most relevant, which is pretty self-explaining what we've talked about. And you can even remove, people are a little bit scared to remove information, but if there's something that's not that relevant, you might take that out and add something else in. Again, if you've done quite a few different things, some of it might be less relevant, so you just want to make it the most relevant for the reader. In essence, I've been blathering on for a while, basically what you need to do is show them that they need you. And that you have the skills that they have. So you're literally joining the dots for them. You're not asking them to assume anything. You're not expecting them to read a three-page cover letter with all this information that's not then reflected on your resume. You just need to make it as easy as possible in a short time frame for someone to see that you have exactly what they're looking for. So as I said before, if you do nothing else, do a really good analysis of the job ad that you're applying for. So we'll just really quickly, this is just an ad I picked off Seek at some stage, and I've just highlighted some key points. So the About You section is really the selection criteria. So that's self-explanatory, bachelor's degree, articulate communication, etc., etc. But as I said earlier, look not just at the selection criteria, look at other things. So I've sort of highlighted it's a digital imaging company that might be relevant to my application. They're really committed to customer satisfaction and sustainability. Actually, that really interests me, so that's quite interesting. And what's the role doing? Working on websites, planning promotions, and preparing marketing materials. Why that might be relevant is because when you think about it, if you've done those sorts of things already, or you're interested particularly in sustainability or customer satisfaction, or you've worked in a customer service role, for example, all that information is valuable, and you weave that and tie that into your application. So I talked about some of the things you can do to tailor, and one of those was to just tweak and tailor that professional summary section or career objective, whatever you call it, so that very first section on your resume. So if you think about the job ad that I just shared, can I get a show? Well, I'll give you a chance to read these two. So this is just two examples of professional summaries that could appear on the top of a resume in relation to that ad. So option A, can I get a show of hands who think that that's probably, if you were a recruiter, would you think option A was the best one? Option B? Yeah. And I know it's fairly self-explanatory, but the reason we sort of do this is because we see it all the time. So we think it's self-explanatory, but people aren't taking the time to do that. But if you look at option B, essentially, they've already told me in those first few sentences at the very top of the resume that they're majoring in marketing, and the requirement was a Bachelor of Commerce degree in marketing or similar. They've told me that they've actually done web-based sales, and if you refer to the job ad before, it was talking about doing web sales. They've worked on promotional material in a marketing internship, etc., etc. So it's almost like, if I was the recruiter and I saw those two, I would certainly be erring on or going for option B, and it's going to make me want to read down further. Now, cover letters are tricky. Can I get a show of hands because we meet a lot of students who cover letters, from where they're from, cover letters aren't very common. Is there anyone who that applies to? Yep. Yeah. So they're particularly common in Australia, as if you've already started applying, you probably know that. So we just want to quickly touch on what's the purpose of a cover letter ultimately. Ultimately, a cover letter allows you to tell the story about you a little bit better than or a little bit more liberally, I guess, than your resume. So, and it's something that you can adjust quite readily for each job that you apply for. So it tells the employer why you are the best fit for that role. It shows your enthusiasm. As I said before, do a little bit of research and then tell them why you're interested in their organisation, why you're interested in that particular role. Don't just say it excites you, but why does it excite you? Show a little bit of research. So it's your ability, before you get in front of somebody, to show how passionate and interested you are in that role. It allows you to address those specific selection criteria and specific skills and experience that you have, not your general skills and experience, but the ones that relate to the job advert that you're applying for, and shows that research, as I said, and a bit of understanding about the organisation. You're not expected to be an expert, but what is a positive for an employer is to see that you've bothered to do a little bit of research and show them that you're passionate. One of the most interesting cover letters I saw recently, and you don't need to go down to this degree, but was for an external employer we were helping to recruit for. It was a telecommunications company, and everyone had their cover letter, which most of them were good, and technically most of the people could do the job. But this cover letter stood out to me because the person was telling the story about, when I got my first phone, I was 9 years old when we got our first phone, and then I was 12 years old when I got the internet, and I was so excited. And you don't have to go down to this degree, but it did stand out to me because it wasn't a technical role they were applying for, but they basically wrote that cover letter for that company, and that gave me great confidence in sending them through for interview. Just quickly on the format of a cover letter, it is fairly standardised. As I said, make sure you follow the instructions. If they ask you to address the selection criteria and to keep it to 2 pages, then make sure you do that. But we would say, on average, if it just says please attach your cover letter and resume, try and keep it to 1 page. Make sure you address it like a letter, so you structure it like a letter with the date, you're addressing the person. If you don't know the person, sir, madam, or something similar is okay. Make sure you tell them what job you're applying for. That sounds very basic, but they might be recruiting for 40 jobs at any one time, so you want to make it, again, as easy for the recruiter as you can. The first paragraph is just, I'm writing, expressing your interest in what role you're applying for. Paragraph 2 or 3, depending on how much you've got in there, is addressing those specific selection criteria, showing the skills, the relevant skills that you have. And paragraph 3 is what a lot of people miss, and this is the one that I was talking about, is the why. Why are you passionate? Why are you interested? Show a little bit of research into the company. Some people put some people put that paragraph first, and that's kind of a good strategy, I think, because it tells that story about why you're really excited about the role. So where you put it doesn't matter, but just make sure you do put it. And paragraph 4 is touching on the panel questions we had before. Rebecca said put your visa status on your resume. I'm saying you could put it in your cover letter, but as long as you put it in your application. So thank them for their time, look forward to hearing from them, and then this is where you might talk about your visa situation or your ability to work unrestricted for a certain amount of time. Looking at the job ad or the position description, and then, and tying, because, they can see your resume, so don't try and just repeat your resume. It's more about drawing out the very specific things that you have that they're asking for, and maybe using a few examples, as demonstrated in my role or worked on this project. So you sort of try and use specific examples as well. A lot of people tend to just say, I have excellent communication skills. Well, anyone can say that. Where have you demonstrated that? So make sure you do use an example or two. And this is not an actual whole letter, obviously, but just to give you a little, literally, it's not. You can find templates for this online, but the first paragraph is just you're excited to apply. I'm writing to apply for a particular position. My skills and experience align to this role because, and then talk about those examples. This position excites me because I'm passionate about this particular industry, whatever it may be. It needs to be your reason, because remember, if you get an interview, it needs to be an authentic reason, because then you might have to talk about it when you get to interview. And that's just an example of the final paragraph where you might talk about your visa status. As we talked about in the panel, it's important to sort of basically spell out, without requiring sponsorship, because a lot of employers won't know what Order 485 entitles you to, for example. So if you actually say outright, I don't require sponsorship for a certain amount of years, that can be quite attractive to people who may not have even known that. Because sometimes it might be a recruiter reviewing your resume, sometimes it might be a hiring manager. Yes, maybe recruiters might know about particular visas, but they might not know about your particular field, and you might have longer that you can work than other people on that visa. So make sure you sort of spell it out and tell them you don't require sponsorship. When you're doing your application, just draw on all your experiences. And what we mean by that is, if you don't have a lot of work experience, draw on your university assignments. If you've done any volunteer work, if you're part of a student society, you've been in sporting teams, group projects, those sorts of things. But in particular, if you've had to do or you're about to do a PACE or work integrated learning unit, whether that be an actual internship or a group project, make sure you're including that. A lot of people ask that. Make sure you're including that on your resume, even if it was a group project. Talk about what the project was. What was your role? What did you do? What transferable skills did you demonstrate? Because it shows an Australian employer in particular that you've worked either in an Australian company, or you've done a project for an Australian company, Australian-based company. So you've been given valuable insight into working within an Australian organisation and got some good transferable skills there. So now that you're all experts now on tailoring your documents, it's going to take a little bit of time, but hopefully we've got time. We're just going to hand out a job advert. So you're all going to be the recruiters now. I'm going to hand you out a job advert and 2 applications. So you're going to imagine yourself as the recruiters. And I'm sorry about the trees, but we couldn't think of a quicker way to do this, to show the applications. We might need to share one between 2. I mean, there probably is enough, but you're all spread out quite a lot. Has anyone got any questions just while we're handing those out? Yeah? Oh.
So I'm a biotech graduate. I'm Akshi.
They're everywhere. Had a few clients. Okay, just while we're handing those out, but I think we're nearly handing them out, we just had a question from up the back from a Masters of Biotechnology student. I seem to be coming across many of those lately. Just had a question around, because of a lot of their work that they're applying for is asking about what projects they've worked on, so research projects, I'm assuming, and how they represent that on their resume, considering that recruiters don't spend a long time. I think that the short answer would be try not to write too much. So try and keep it succinct. I would, even if it is a project, I'd still, and if that's particularly if you haven't got a lot of work experience. If it's a project, try and still do it in bullet points. Talking about the skills that you've utilised. So start with those action words, but I'd recommend you do it in bullet points. I recommend you do all your experience in bullet points, because I saw a resume this week that it wasn't too many words, but it was just a whole lot of paragraphs, and it's not easy for me. And you want to start each bullet point with a new idea, so a different skill, a different responsibility, a task that you did. So I'd probably represent it similarly to how you would your work experience. And the other question was how long do recruiters spend on cover letters? That's a tricky one. It's probably another 10 seconds, but some, quite honestly, and it's terrible to tell you this, but you speak to one recruiter and they're like, I don't read cover letters. You speak to another recruiter, I read the cover letter first because it tells the story. Some go straight to the resume. If I'm honest for myself, I usually read the resume first just to go, is it worth me reading the cover letter? So you want to, on that note, you want to make each document stand on its own because you don't know what you're going to read first. And if they've got 60, 100 resumes to read, you want each to almost stand on its own and be interesting and, again, tailored. So good question, thank you. All right. We'll just do this. I'm not sure how we're going for time. I haven't got time. Okay. I'll save the question if we can. I'll hold off the question. We'll just do this activity and then we'll open up to questions. I'm not sure how we got on time. But hopefully, this shouldn't take too long because remember, you're recruiters. Okay, got 5 minutes. So hopefully you're only reading these for 10 seconds, remember, 10 to 20 seconds. But if you read the job ad, can I get a show of, or can I ask you, who thinks the first resume, who would you put through? Who would you put through first? Resume 1? I can't remember who it is. Is that Mohammed? I know we're a bit pressed for time. I've got it here. Oh. So who would put through Mohammed first? Or who would pick Mohammed over the 2 applications? Was that a show of hands then? No? You would? Okay. Who would pick the second applicant? Yeah. I know you might not have all read, but remember, you might be reading 100 applications at once. So most people who've had a chance to look at those have said the second application. Can I ask why? Is anyone happy to say why? And don't just say because it's tailored. Can you give specifics? Yep. Yep. Yep.
And then Addie's is,
Mm-hmm.
and then through Canberra,
Yep. Anything else? Yep.
Well, I just looked at here, I use cover letter, and you can see yes on that, because
Yep.
it straight away draws the criteria and it's
Yeah. And Addie talks about, they've bothered to sort of, notice that it's a publishing company and they're really into reading and they talk about, Addie talks about, your 3 of your key authors are my favourite authors. So they're showing that little bit, Addie's showing a little bit of research into the company, but also that passion about what they do, basically. Yep.
Addie also included LinkedIn profile.
Yes. Yep.
Which is another very excellent way to show bestseller twice.
Yep. Yes, and recruiters may not have time, but actually a lot of recruiters do also look at LinkedIn profiles. So if you've got a LinkedIn profile, make sure it's up to a standard that you want them to see it before you attach it or include the link. But it's a good, valuable way of them to see, find out a little bit more about you. Yeah? So that's a great question. How do you write a cover letter if you don't have a lot of experience? As I said a couple of slides ago, draw on your other experiences. Your university. What subjects have you done that are relevant to the role that you're applying for potentially? What transferable skills have you developed through your university? Have you worked on group projects? So if you haven't got a lot of experience, you can put things like group projects you worked on at university, student societies if you're a member of any of those, teams that you've worked on. So, for example, if they're asking for strong written communication skills, you might talk about, the reports that you wrote at university, for example. So just think about the other ways that you can show those skills. But importantly, so that's for, showing them that you've got the skills. But again, that research and passion about the role, it goes on your cover letter as well. So you can, maybe write a little bit more along those lines, basically about why you're excited for the role. Now, I think I'm essentially out of time. But what I will do, if we've got another minute, We heard from Sina and Rebecca from the student employment team earlier, and they work on quite a few jobs, both on campus as well as external recruiters. So there's a QR code there. If you want to register and join the Job Ready Club for the team there, what that gives you is a bit more extra coaching on your job application, as well as you can get feedback. You actually do an interview with the team when you join the Job Ready Club, and so they can just give you a little bit of coaching before you actually start applying for roles, or even if you have started applying for roles, it just give you a bit of additional coaching. There's a lot of tools on Employability Connect on what we call My MQ Career Zone, but specifically there's a tool called the CV Builder. So it actually builds a CV for you. There's a lot of templates online that you can also use, obviously, but if you want to start from scratch maybe, you can use that tool to build your resume. But again, make sure after you build it, that you tailor it every time you're applying for a role, of course. The student employment team have a lot of opportunities that they're either working on directly or indirectly with employers that are currently being advertised that are still open, and that's some of the examples there. So these are some of the jobs that we know are open to international students. So jump on Employability Connect, look under the Macquarie Student Employment Team roles category, and all of these roles should be still available for you to apply for. Keep in touch with us. We have a Facebook page, so if you search for the Employability Connect Facebook page and join that group, we talk about events that are coming up, hints and tips and tricks, and things like that, and we also advertise some roles on there as well. And if you didn't know, as was talked about before, you've got 12 months access, at least after you graduate, to our team, to the Careers and Student Employment team, and also the Writing Centre. You heard from Caitlin and Daniel on the panel earlier. We've got a new face-to-face reception desk, if you like, so come and see us down at 18 Wally's Walk. If you go straight into 18 Wally's Walk, there is Service Connect, so they've got the fancy desks. If you turn left, we've got sort of less fancy desks, but a lot of quality there. You'll see us there, and we can basically give you some coaching on the spot if there's time, but also, talk to you about where to find things, give you tips and pointers and things like that. The Writing Centre's also down there as well if you need help with assignments or business writing and things like that. So come down and see us. We really recommend you do. And up next, the second sprint section, that's just, again, showing where they are. So if you're staying here for building and maintaining professional relationships, if you haven't moved from here since we started, I think maybe get up, go for a walk, go to the loo. But otherwise, the other two presentations are starting soon. So thanks very much.